Hi, Instagram. Hi, Facebook. I am Shonnie Lavender. I am the Conscious Moms Coach, and I'm excited to be with you today. I'm going to be talking about sharing. So that's a topic that I know is something that comes up for every family I've ever worked with. And it tends to be really common for families with younger children, but it's also something that comes up with older children as well. And I'm going to talk about some of why that is. And specifically, though, I want to give us some different ways to think about sharing and really consider how you want to handle sharing situations in your family. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. Let me make sure everything is running as I expect it to, and looks like it all is. So yeah, let me just make sure it's all there. Okay, good. Okay, so I am going to record this. I put this up on my YouTube channel after the fact. So if you can't catch me live on either Instagram, hi, so glad that you're here. So if you can't catch me Instagram or Facebook, you can always catch these usually about a week later on my YouTube channel. So let me get recording and then I'll get going. Hi, this is Shonnie Lavender, the Conscious Moms Coach, and today I'm going to be talking about sharing. Now, sharing is something that most of us really think, oh yes, I want my child to be someone who shares. We see that as somebody who's a good citizen, they're caring for others, they have empathy, they have thoughtfulness. So it's a trait that adults, parents included, tend to really prize. And what I find is that for many of us, when our children don't want to share, we usually have a negative reaction. Now, we don't always act on that, but often inside there is that, oh no, my kid should be sharing. This is awful. I need my child to share. And oftentimes there is a reaction that parents have. There is a real striving to get the child to share. That may or may not be your perspective. And I'm going to invite you actually to have a different perspective, but that's what I've noticed. And it comes up in me too, and in my husband. And so it's just a common thing that I think for most of us, we definitely have some moments where we're dealing with that impulse of my child should be sharing, and that drive. I mean, you can see me sitting forward. It's like that drive that, oh, they should share and I should make them do it and help them do it because it's so important. So that's part of what I'm going to be talking about today. And I'm also going to be talking about really why we think that, why that comes up, and give you maybe some thoughts to challenge that thinking. And then I'm also going to talk about another framework for sharing, a new framework perhaps for you, so that you can experiment with it and see how it works. And don't take my word for it. Experiment with it, use it in your life, see what you notice in you, see what you notice in your child, see what you notice in the interactions that happen, and let me know. I'm always open for feedback and hearing what your experience is. So let me go ahead and get started. I want to talk first about our general beliefs and attitudes around sharing. So here's what I think is true based on my life experience, is that we, and when I say we, I mean adult people, especially in Western cultures, which is where I come from and what I'm used to, that we see a willingness to share is a trait of a good person. It's a considerate person. It's a generous person. In other words, it's a trait that we desire in people. Yes, you should share. That is something we say makes you a good person, is your willingness to share. So that's what I think is the general belief, that we'd say it's a positive trait. Here's what I noticed though, is so with kids, we generally very strongly hold to this viewpoint. They should be sharing, whether it's a toy when they're a toddler, or food with their friend when they come over for a play date. Those kind of things, we say, oh yes, our child should be sharing with this friend, with this other person, with their sibling. So that's what I see with children. And so let me give an example that I think is very, very common and see how it plays out. And what I'd love to do is, while you're listening to this example, is notice what comes up for you. Notice which child you feel more positive about. If you have some negative reaction to one of the children, which one is it? So just to see. So here's the scenario. So there's a play date and there's two friends, Megan and Abby, and we'll call them, young children, maybe 4, 5. So Megan is playing with several dolls. She's having a little, mock tea party, right? So she's got several dolls and she obviously only has 2 arms, so she can only really play with a couple at once, but she's got several dolls there at her tea party. Now, Abby wants to play with one of the dolls. So she said, oh, this, I want to play with the redhead doll. So that's the doll she's wanting. And Megan refuses. Megan's like, no, they're at the tea party. That doll can't play. That's my doll. I'm playing with it. And so Abby gets really upset and she's begging to play with the doll. She's like, please, I want to play with this doll. I want to, whether she says why, but she wants to play with this doll. And so Abby's really, really upset and Megan is simply refusing to share because that doll is in her tea party. So if you're willing to share right now, I'd love to hear. So are you more sympathetic towards Megan, who's got the tea party going on and is not wanting to share? Or are you more sympathetic towards Abby, who's saying, really, I just want this one doll out of your whole tea party. That's the only one I want to play with. So if you want to share, I'd love to hear it. No sharing, all right, that's over on Instagram. So yeah, you're along my lines, but I think most people, again, you've got this one child's crying, the other one has plenty of toys. And so there is, for many of us, yeah, you're totally with Megan. I'm glad to hear that, Emmeline. So not all parents are like that though. For many, especially if you're the one of the child who's like, hey, I just want this one, it can be hard, right? Like, oh, my child's upset. This other kid has so much. Why can't she just share? That comes up for a lot of people. And thankfully, there are many of us, and it sounds like, Emmeline, you are one of those people where you're like, okay, I get there. Yeah, there's that piece, what you're saying, Shonnie, and there's other pieces as well. And that's part of what I want to talk about. Before I do that, though, I want to take sort of this idea of sharing is good to the adult realm and just see how, if any way, our beliefs change. So remember, I said in general, the belief is a positive thing, that sharing is good. We should share. And it's a mark of a good person if you share. Well, with adults, I find that it tends to be a little bit different. So sharing is still often considered positive, but it's not expected to the same degree as we often do with children. And in fact, there may be scenarios in which sharing, for some people, not for everybody, but sharing might seem weird or even foolish. So let me give a few scenarios and just see what you think about these. So you're eating lunch, you're at work, and your coworker grabs a sandwich off your plate and starts to eat it because she says, well, I'm hungry too. That looks like a good sandwich. I want to eat it. So you're sharing with her. Now, it wasn't necessarily by choice, but most people, I think, would find that a little strange, right? Well, no, that's my lunch. I'm eating it. It's not your lunch. Here's another scenario. So let's say you have a sister and she's not married and she lives nearby you, right? So now she insists, though, that you share your husband half of the week with her. So again, some people, again, if you are polygamist, that would seem normal. Most people are not. So I think for most of us, we'd say, I'm not going to share my husband half a week with you. That's bizarre, right? Yeah, I love it, Emmeline. Yeah, thank you. So it's like, excuse me? So wait a minute, but it's sharing, right? It's the same thing we were talking about with kids. Well, they should share their toy, right? Yeah, they should share their toy. That's a nice thing to do. These 2 adult scenarios, you're probably thinking, yeah, I'm not sharing, Shonnie. There's 2 more scenarios just to play this out a little more. So your neighbor asks to borrow your car every Tuesday and Saturday when you're not using it, and basically expects that, you should loan them your car those times. Again, maybe that's what you do. Cool, great. But again, we might sort of be like, what? That's my car. What do you want my car for? That's my car. What if I need to use it, type of thing. And one final one. So you're sitting there watching your favorite show, and your child comes up and they switch the channel to watch their favorite cartoon because they're like, well, we're going to share the device or share this TV. So many of us would probably be like, excuse me, I was watching that show, right? So there's a different set of beliefs that tend to frame sharing as it relates to adults and as it relates to children. And so that is part of why I want to suggest, if you notice, unlike Emmeline on Instagram, if you notice that you have this really strong desire and anytime there's a sharing opportunity, you are wanting to push your child to share, I want to invite you to reconsider that. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying don't ever do that. I'm saying I'd like to invite you to consider something new, in part, given what I just described, the differences between how we treat sharing as adults and how we treat it for children. Basically, in adulthood, we treat sharing as a choice. There are many reasons that we still view sharing as desirable and kind and thoughtful, and yet we treat it as an option. It is an optional activity versus a demand or requirement. So that's what I want to invite you to do with your child too, is say, okay, sharing is optional. Sharing is a choice you get to make or not make. So here's what that invites for you then, if you decide to take that approach, is so now you're going to have those situations where your child has the thing and another child or somebody else in your family is wanting that thing and your child has it. So then you get to be with your child when they are not wanting to share. So your practice there that I invite you to do is just notice what comes up for you. And I'm pretty sure that some of what's going to come up for you are going to be thoughts about what is this other person, or what are these other people going to think about my child? What are they going to think about me? And these aren't going to be most likely conscious thoughts. They tend to come just really quickly into our mind. I just invite you to sit with those and notice, like, oh yeah, I'm really wanting my child to be seen as this thoughtful, kind, loving, generous person. And just notice that. You don't have to do anything, just notice. Yeah, thanks, Emily. And so let's yes, just sit there with it and be like, whoo, I gotta breathe because this is tense for me. So especially depending on your own sort of personality type, I'm a recovering people pleaser and recovering perfectionist. So yeah, that can come up with me big time. And what I notice is, especially when the other child involved, if it's two children, is a friend, so it's not just a random child at the playground, especially when it's a friend, that, I want that child to have a nice experience at our home or interacting with my daughter. And so I know in the past, I have been somebody who at times has said to my daughter, look, I want you to find something to share with her. And so it's like that part of us, for many of us, not all of us, but most of us, I would say, have that part that is sort of like, I've got to make things feel good and feel right for other people. And the way I do that is by saying, yes, this desirable trait is no longer an option. It is a demand that you have to find something to do. And excuse me a minute. I'm like, the light is shining in here. It's like making this weird light on my face. Hold on. Live video. It's lovely. Okay. It's distracting me. Okay, I'm back. So just sit with those feelings and just notice, yeah. And Emmeline, thank you. Yeah. So and it's funny, you said, I'm guilty of that too. I was going to use that word guilty. And I said, nope, it's not something we don't need to be guilty of. It's something, that we all have conditioning that sometimes we act out of automatically because we're not being conscious about, is this really the choice that I want to be making right now? So just sit with that. So if you're the child is the one who's not wanting to share, sit with how you feel about that, what that brings up for you. And the other thing I would say is notice that, notice the way you might talk about it. So this is something, and Emmeline, great question, which I'll get to in a moment. So I invite you also to notice what you say or what you do, because one of the things I find is that for trying to figure out how to say this well, for behaviors that are the ones that we are socially conditioned to do, those desirable behaviors, and sharing would be one of those, that when our child is not wanting to do that socially acceptable behavior, sometimes what comes out of our mouth is language that ends up minimizing our child because we're sort of trying to soften, we're feeling awkward. And so it's like, so it's like that shy thing when a child doesn't like want to say hi to an adult who said hi to them. And we'll say, oh, they're shy or they're feeling shy. And it's like, no, I mean, maybe, but it's like, they're not shy. That's where they're at. They're not wanting to say hi. And yet we will then sometimes put a label on our child. And again, I'm not judging you. I do it too. So just be aware, like, oh, did I just say something that in some way actually was sort of giving my child a message that what you're choosing to do right now is not okay, rather than just being able to say, they don't want to share right now. Ooh, that's hard to say for many of us, right? Like, they don't want to share right now. I can even feel it sort of right here and be like, oh, could I admit that? Am I willing to admit that? And I do, but sometimes that's really, really tough. So notice what you're feeling when your child is not wanting to share, and then notice what you say or do. Okay, so that's my invitation for you when that's the position your child is in. Emmeline asked, why is it so much more difficult with people you know and friends? Hi, thanks also for joining on Instagram. I think it depends. I think different people are different. So some of us, again, recovering people pleaser and perfectionist. So I very much have this desire, trained desire, if you will, to keep the people around me happy. So if it's friends, then, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm obviously going to see them again. So I want to keep them happy. Now, I will say on a side note is just yesterday, this is sort of tangential, but for those of you watching, hang with me. So just yesterday, I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, I had a really bad sinus headache. And a good friend and I were supposed to get together yesterday to be with each other, but also support each other on business things and so forth. And I love getting together with this friend, and I really wanted to do it. I was looking forward to it because we don't see each other a lot. She is a friend, though, who I absolutely know has the self-awareness and the belief system where even though she would be disappointed most likely, because she was really looking forward to the time as well, that she also wants me to take good care of myself and knows that, that's an important piece for me to listen to myself. And so I texted her, and I was like, but it took me most of the morning before I was willing to actually say, hey, I really don't feel comfortable doing this today because I don't feel well enough and I'm disappointed, and let's reschedule. And she actually called me and we talked about it. So I think depending on the type of friends we have and the way we interact with those friends, sometimes we might actually be more willing to say to a friend, hey, my child doesn't want to share, than we would be with strangers. So I think everybody's different. So just be aware. That's why I invite you, sit with your own feelings. What comes up for you? What are you believing? What is your mind saying to you? What are you doing out of that thinking? And just notice. So if your child doesn't want to share, that's what I invite you to do. I'm going to pause for just a second because I want to make sure there's folks over on Facebook. Hi, Jennifer. I'm so glad you're here. Feel free if anybody has questions. I can't always see them in Facebook, sometimes live, but anyway, post them anyway, and I will eventually respond. So let me get to the other half. So if your child is the one who is wanting something that somebody else has, then you have a different set of options. So what I invite you to do when your child is the one in the desire is acknowledge their desire. So, oh, you really want to play with that toy. Oh, you really want to sit in that chair. Oh, you really want to be on that swing, whatever it is. So acknowledge to your child, I get you're wanting this thing. You want to be in that position. You want to have that. So just acknowledge it to start. and then be with your child. So instead of being with yourself more, you're really focusing more on, okay, I'm going to be with my child right now and how they are in this situation. So be with them and empathize with them. So maybe they start to cry, maybe they get mad. I don't know what they're going to do. It depends on the child, depends on the situation. But so empathize with them. So you're feeling really angry right now. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard sometimes when there's something you want that you don't get to have. Yeah. So, let them be your leader in terms of what they're feeling. You're going to empathize. I see, I notice what you're feeling, or I hear, your voice, or I see the tears, and be with them and empathize and just notice those feelings. And my chances are there's going to be feelings that come up in you. So depending on what emotion your child is feeling, you may be really easy with that emotion. It may be easy for you to flow with. It may be an emotion that you have a hard time with your child expressing. You might have a strong negative reaction to anger. So it might take you some deep breathing to really stay present and just allow their anger, allow them to be that way. You might be somebody who has a hard time with sadness, and you might be wanting to make it better. And, oh, let me get you this other toy. And, oh, look, there's this. And I'm not saying don't ever do that. I'm saying this is really an opportunity for your child to have their emotional experience and for you to be with them and help them simply learn how to be with their emotions without having to distract them, try and move them to something different, try and make it different. It's like you're making it better by being with them, but you're not forcing it to be better. So that forcing it to be better, that's the distraction. That's doing something like, oh, look, you have this, and that's not a big deal anyway. There's this thing, or I'll get you that instead. That's that way of trying to move them to another emotion rather than just being with them. And when you be with them, when you are with them, that in that empathetic state, they move through their emotions naturally. Now, it might take them 30 seconds. It might take them 3 minutes. Might take them 30 minutes to really get back to a more calm emotional state. But that's what I'm inviting you to do. So when your child is in desire, acknowledge what they're desiring, acknowledge the reality of, yeah, that other child has that toy, or that other child's on the swing right now. Or your brother doesn't want to share with you right now. Your brother wants to have the TV room to himself with his friends, whatever it is, you just acknowledge and then empathize. Then it is really hearing where they're at, what's coming up for them, sitting with them in that emotional state, letting them know you're there and that they're okay in that emotional state. It's okay to be mad. It's okay to be sad. Absolutely. Because part of what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to help them develop those emotional resilience muscles. Because guess what? In life, there are going to be plenty of opportunities, as you already know, that are going to look like they don't get what they want. And so you're helping them be able to sit in their emotional state without completely losing control, ultimately, and just be with their feelings. And if we always try and move them through their feelings or out into another feeling, they don't learn to sit in disappointment or frustration or longing. You want them to be able to be there because that's going to happen through life. So that's what you're doing by empathizing with them, is letting them know, yeah, it's okay to be right where you are, and we're going to get through it. So that's what I invite you to do when your child is in desire. Emmeline, you asked about taking turns and waiting your turn. Great example. So I think it can be a little bit different. So if there is a game that that is the way it goes, which with many games, that is part of it, right? Is like, you go, then I go, you go, then I go. Then not all kids are going to be able to do that all the time. So I think sometimes if that's the rules of the game, and especially if there are multiple people participating, unless everybody else wants to really okay, yeah, sure, whatever, random order doesn't, some people can go twice. Then I think it's different. Then I think it is more about, okay, this is the way this game works. And so you're sitting with the child in, I don't want to take turns. Well, then maybe this game isn't right for you right now. This is a game that requires turn taking. So maybe let's sit it out until you're ready to take turns. So that's a situation where I think depends again on the whole game and the whole structure. I think though that is often one where you're going to want to say to the child, if they're having trouble taking turns, like, this might not be a game for you right now, unless other people, just like, I don't know if you did this when your kids were little, but yes, there were rules to go fish and things like that. But there were times when I would play with my daughter where I would ask for a card repeatedly that I had. I knew she'd have another one, but I would be choosing because I'm like, you know what? I see the way the last 3 games have gone. She's lost 3 of them. And so sometimes I would say, you know what? I'm going to not play by the rules. So I was making that choice. I was doing that adult thing again. I'm saying, I'm going to choose to change the rules. So if you're just the one playing with your kid, I'd say, see what's going on. Look at the situation. Look at the bigger picture than, okay, is this one time of not taking turns, is that going to be the biggest deal ever? No, it's not. In a certain context, though, it may just not really work. So Emmeline, that's my take on that. So if you have some thoughts, I welcome those. But yeah, each situation is different. And what I would say in general, though, is we want to be really as conscious as we can, which we can do sometimes, and sometimes we're just not there, of what are we doing? What's motivating it? That idea of we want our children to share, we'd agree that's a noble characteristic. Oh, good. Thanks, Emmeline. So it's a noble characteristic. I do want my daughter to be someone who's willing to share. I want to be willing to share. I want other people to be willing to share with me and my family and other people. So I do personally believe that sharing and the willingness to share is a noble trait. However, I don't think that means that I need to force my daughter to share to get her to be someone who does share. And that to me is one of those points in parenting that I think we often forget, is we get so tunnel vision in the moment with experiences with our kids that we sometimes blow up things and make them a lot bigger deal than they really are. Now, does that mean other people might sometimes think, man, that kid's a brat? They might. I don't have control of that. They might think that anyway. So it's that idea, though, that it's like none of that's in our control anyway. So think more of big picture. Yes, I do want my child to be someone who shares, and yet that doesn't mean that I need to make her share all the time. It's a totally different thing. They're not related. There are lots of opportunities, trust me, that kids get where sometimes they're going to be forced to share. Sometimes they're going to choose to share. Sometimes we are going to ask them to share, so there's going to be a lot of opportunities to practice sharing. And even when your kids get older and you think, oh, well, they should share now. This is the thing. In fact, Dan Siegel talked about this in a conversation he and I had. He talked about getting really upset with his son one day when he didn't want to share some food with his sister, the son's sister, right? So Dan's 2 kids. And so again, even when our kids get to be teenagers, then we have some different expectations. So we're thinking, oh yeah, a 4-year-old, they're self-centered, which is true. They are more self-centered. That's their stage of development. And we think, oh no, a teenager should not be, well, maybe we think a teenager is self-centered too, but you know what I'm saying? We think in general that, oh, a teenager should be more mature and be able to make the right choice to share. Well, no, it's still the same. It's like, if sharing is a choice that we get to make as adults, then sharing is a choice that our teens get to make as well. And so wherever you are in your parenting journey, whatever age and stage your kids are at, I simply invite you to remember that sharing, even if it's a choice that you want your child to be making more often than less often, that you're going to have plenty of opportunities to do it and to work with them on that skill. And you are going to also find that they don't need every time to be about sharing. Some of the times it's really simply very helpful for them to sit with what comes up when they don't get the thing that they're wanting, sit with the feelings they have, and be supported by you with empathy and understanding. And sometimes it's also good practice for them to not be willing to share, to be able to say, you know, this is what I'm doing right now, and this is the thing I'm doing. And that doesn't mean that they have a character flaw. That means that, yeah, they're also learning. Sometimes I'm going to say no. Sometimes I'm not going to be willing to share. So trust that where they are in the journey is going to be okay. Where you are in the journey is okay. And if you have further thoughts on this topic, I'd love to hear them. So thank you for taking the time to watch and interact. I'm pause and check over on Facebook. Thank you, Margareta. Hello, good to see you. And Stephanie, hi, I'm glad you're here. So yeah, so if there are any other questions or comments, feel free. I'll stay here for another minute or so. And oh, you're welcome, Emmeline. Thank you for interacting. Yay, I'm only on Instagram a little bit like this, so thanks for interacting. Made it more enjoyable for me. Hi, Sofnab, thanks. So feel free, if you missed the video on Instagram or on Facebook, go back and watch. And again, I do my best to come back and reply to comments or questions. So feel free, even if the live video has ended. Oh, you're welcome, Paula. You're most welcome. Let me see. So Emmeline, say a little bit more about that. You said question about greeting from before as a social good manner. You're gonna have to fill me in. I'm like, oh, greeting. I think what you mean is like when somebody says hi to your child and your child like hides behind your leg. So tell me if that's what you mean, but I think that's what you mean. Yeah, especially older people expect to be greeted back. Yes, they do. So, and so it's an interesting thing. So yeah, so here comes grandma or an elderly person at your church or the mail carrier, whoever it is, and they're like, hi to your kid, and your kid's like gripping your leg, right? They're, oh no, I can't, I'm looking down. So your parents-in-law, exactly. So that is a challenging one, right? Because for most of us, again, we're like, oh, I should say hi, or I should say hi on my child's behalf. Here's what I think is very interesting. I spent some time, I lived in France 20 plus years ago, while I was in college. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting there, and my experience there, was that the French people, by and large, my experience, do not smile like Americans smile. And I don't mean they don't smile, they do smile, but they don't smile in the same, like, I'm walking down the street, hi, you know, I smile at you, little wave type of thing. Now, I also noticed that happens in big cities in the US. Like if you go to New York City, walking down the street, there's not usually a lot of eye contact. So there's lots of reasons for that from the psychological perspective. But so part of that is simply conditioning. It's like, oh, we're conditioned as Americans, speaking from, that's my background. We're conditioned to, oh, somebody says hello, we should say hello back. Well, why? I mean, literally, it's like, well, why should you say hello? That's because we've been conditioned, and that's why. So that's not an answer to your question, but the thing I would say in part is when it comes up in us and we think, oh, something should be said, well, that's just what we've been socialized to do. So that's my first thing, is just notice that, okay, it's a socialized thing. It's not a have to. It just is something we've been taught we're supposed to do in our cultures. So that's on the one hand. Now, what I would say personally for me is I would, most of the time, except when I don't, I would say hello, not for my child, but I would say hello almost like a surrogate. I'm not necessarily saying my child says hello to you. I'm simply saying, oh, hi. And I'd let it be that. It's like, I've said hello. My child, for whatever reason, doesn't want to say hello right now, and that's okay. And I would also trust, if it's a relative, that if there is a good feeling with that relative, that over time the child would actually do something to greet that person, whether it's 5 minutes later and they go sit by grandma, um, that they're going to, when they feel their readiness is available, then they're going to step forward with their greeting. So is it in the time the grandparent wants? No. Is it in the way the grandparent wants? No. They're an adult though, and they can deal with that. Now, it doesn't mean they're always going to deal with it well. But for that then is you get to talk with them or not, it's up to you, but, say, here's what we're doing. Here's the way we're doing it, is that, yes, we want our son or our daughter to do a socially acceptable greeting. And we don't force it because it's a part of a larger trajectory for us of being conscious, making choices that really fit, and that we, and this is my words, so this is not your words, Emmeline, but we believe that there are things that, while they are niceties, we trust that our child will develop those as they grow. They're only 3 now, or they're only 5 or whatever. And so you're not making excuses. You're just saying, here's our viewpoint. And so that's what we're going to do. And so, again, like it or lump it. And those are some of our challenges as parents interacting with others when we are doing parenting in a way that is different than society at large, which it sounds like you are, Emmeline, and I am. Then yeah, absolutely. Sometimes we are going to be right at, a rubbing point with our culture where we are not going to fit in. And that is challenging for most of us. We don't like to, be at crossroads. Hey, from Portugal, hello. So yeah. And so that's another place where we get to sit with, oh yeah, how am I with this? And I, with my daughter, just as a sort of a side note, my daughter's 8. I will talk to her sometimes about if I know we're going into a situation, I will prep her sometimes and say, this is one of those situations where this is the expectation from others. And so I let her know that, hey, here's what's going to be expected. And I will sometimes then say something like, I would really like it if you would blah, 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 if that's important to me. Or I might say, here's the situation and it's totally fine with me if you don't. So I think it's also an opportunity rather to help our kids see our cultural experience and know that, yeah, there's going to be consequences. And so this is probably with an older child. So depending on the age of your child or children, Emmeline, may not work. I think it's a great teaching opportunity though, is to say, you know what, here's the situation and you get to choose and just know that it's going to be how it is. And for me, I noticed that there's almost always opportunities, 6 years, okay, there's almost always opportunities for me to evaluate myself, not, and 4-year-old twins, okay, awesome, to evaluate myself, not from a judgment place, but simply from a place of, that was interesting that I did it that way this time, oh, and so sometimes if I've done it in a way that really runs counter to my values, I'll talk to my daughter and I'll say, you know what? I realized that I did this, I asked you to say thank you, or I didn't make her say it because I can't do that, but I was really strong about wanting you to say thank you. And you know what? That was me. I was feeling sort of concerned about, this was a new setting or new people, and I really wanted them to think well of us. So that was my stuff, and I'm sorry. So, I will do my best not to do that next time. So it's, to me personally, that's the parenting path I'm on. It's like, yep, you know what? Sometimes I'm going to be totally unconscious and I'm going to do things the societally accepted way. Not that that's bad, just that, I'm going to do it that way. And sometimes I'm going to say, wow, that's really not how I wanted to do it. And then I get to learn something with that. And I get to help my daughter see that, you know what, being a human being is complex. And sometimes we're going to make choices that we really are glad we made. Sometimes we're not. So personally, that's the way I approach it. So thanks for asking such interesting questions. And yeah, it's a journey of discovery. So I hope this has been interesting for you all watching. Thank you on Instagram for watching and interacting. Thank you for watching on Facebook and interacting. I am normally here most Thursdays about this time. So please subscribe to my page on Facebook, which is Shonnie Lavender Parent Coaching. Follow me on Instagram at Shonnie Lavender. I have a YouTube channel, which you can look up at Shonnie Lavender Parent Coaching. I have a website, all kinds of stuff. So find me in those places. And also, for those of you on Facebook, I invite you to join a group that I have called the Conscious Moms Circle. So it's a group of 3,600 moms and a few dads worldwide who are there supporting each other in living this conscious parenting journey. So if that sounds like that would be something useful to have in your life, please join us. Again, it's the Conscious Moms Circle. I am Shonnie Lavender. I'm the Conscious Moms Coach, and I'm so grateful to have spent this time with you today. So please join me again, and feel free, if you have comments or questions after the video ends, post them there. All right, take care, everybody. Bye now.